Hydra ponies. This is the first of 2 or perhaps 3 tutorials. This one's going to be for like the normal ponies that I do, not the scary ones. I had gotten a lot of requests for how to do both of these, so I thought I would start with the more straightforward one that we can more closely reference the original style from. I am very experienced with drawing these horses. I have more photo evidence somewhere, but this is just what I was able to dig up. But anyways, as I'm sure many artists in the year of our Lord 2024 can relate to, Lauren Faust has been such a huge inspiration to me throughout my entire life, whether that be through things like Powerpuff Girls, Cats Don't Dance, or obviously My Little Pony. Her style is just so unique, so toony. I love it so much. But what she does and what most other cartoonists do is they are still copying from life, if that makes sense. So a lot of people think that they're just like breaking down and removing features when they're actually trying to combine life with tune to make something that's believable, if not realistic. So we're gonna take like a toony, funky little animal like Twilight Sparkle that seemingly has no relation to real horse anatomy, and we're gonna try to find the common ground between the two. We're gonna see what was kept and what wasn't. So obviously we still have a head, we still have a body, we still have hooves, we still have weird backwards knees that aren't actually backwards, but I'll get to that in a minute. But we're breaking them down into the chunks that, like, chunk major, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing now is I'm saying to find the bones, and we're just going to see what bits of skeletal structure still apply. So what I think the most important part is finding out how the limbs relate to horse limbs and in turn human limbs. So all these ponies are anthropomorphized, and it's a lot easier for me to think of it as like a human body because they are, I would argue, more human than horse based on the way they look in the show. So this graph is very useful. It kind of plagues me. We're going to focus on this part, but you see how it relates, and this helps me a lot, not only with gesture but also with just trying to remember how it all works out. I've explained this briefly before, but now I'm going to try to go into it more. The same thing can be said for the hind leg and the hip. The way that a horse shoulder relates to your shoulder is the exact same way that a horse hip is going to relate to your hip, and we can use that to translate into a pony hip in turn. So here I am just breaking it down again, and I'll explain this more in depth when we actually start doodling. But again, here's another similar graph. We can see how it breaks down and how it relates. So now we're going to take everything that we've learned here and we're going to try to apply that to a pre-existing toony pony pose, and let's just see how that goes. So step 1, we're going to find the bones yet again. So the skull is kind of self-explanatory, but thinking of it as, you know, something that has bones on the inside, it really helps me to imagine how I want it to look in a 3D space, so that helps me draw different angles of a head. But here we go. I found, so the most important joints for me are going to be the shoulder and the hip, because those, so like the limbs, I feel like once you understand where the knee and the elbow are going to go, then you kind of get the posing down, but making the shoulder connect to the rest of the body as well as making the hip connect to the rest of the body, I just think that's what's going to make it look the most convincing. So here I am kind of plotting out where the vertebrae are going to go. Remember that the spine is always going to be coming from the back of the head at the base. So once you figure out where the spine is going, then you can plot out the shoulder blade and the shoulder, and you can just continue to plot that down into the rest of the body. And when it comes to making horse body types, a lot of people want to go with a lankier, sleeker, almost like princess type body type. I certainly enjoy that every now and then, but I think for normal ponies, I do want to make them look pretty small. You know, they're ponies, not really horses. So they're so cute and little. So the thicker I make the leg, the less knobbly I want the knees to be for the most part. So remember that the front knee joint is actually the wrist joint, just so you can kind of figure out how you want to put weight on that. But also remember that this is a cartoon. It doesn't really need to be that great. That's why her head is completely backwards and why her eye is just kind of floating in the middle there. Eye placement is something that I waffle on a lot because, like I said earlier, stylistic choices change sometimes. Sometimes I think like beady little eyes are super cute. Sometimes I want like big pouty eyes. Sometimes I want to be more forward facing. Sometimes I really dig the sideways. It's something I waffle on a lot. It's not like a set stylistic thing for me. Then remember, the tail is just an extension of the spine. You want it to be a bit thicker at the base, and then you just carry it on how you want to, kind of like a cat tail. So for another favorite, I just wanted to show some different ways to draw wings. So I'm going with Derpy, my love. Yeah, so we're doing the same thing. I'm plotting out a much simpler map of the joints, and then here there are multiple ways that you can stylize the wings. So this one is a bit more realistic, I guess. It has like a thicker base, but then like the toony, like all flight feather wings that most Pegasi actually have are also really fun. I'll talk about this a bit more later when I go to like the bigger illustration, but remember how important silhouette and posing are with illustrations overall, especially, I cannot stress this enough. These are silly, funky little pastel horses. You can prioritize like composition over structure, if that makes sense. So like you'll see when it comes up later, but especially for things like wings and hair and placing limbs, you can totally like break the rules, I say with air quotes, just to make it seem cooler. So again, I'm doing the same thing, just kind of plotting it out, seeing how I want the limbs to go, and it's so cute. I like to keep the little, they're not actually ankles, but you know, like the little heels that horses have. I think those are so cute, and they're just a really good way to like, I guess, show, I don't know, just show where things start and stop. I think it's so sweet. But yeah, just going into it, fudging the posing again a little bit. See how I kind of like broke her wrist there to make it work. And then here we're going into the wings. 3 joints, slap them down, hooray. So once you learn the basics, you can apply that to really any pony body type and any creature, actually. A lot of the pony anatomy stuff that I learned when I was a kid has applied to literally any animal. So generally speaking, a predator is going to have a much longer like upper arm region that's a lot closer to humans, and then they're going to have like proper hands. But other than that, ponies pretty much apply to everything, even people. But since we're sticking with ponies, I'm going to show you my more like cutesy illustrated style, and you can really get like as silly as you want once you learn that. This is more serious, like more toony, like chunky, cute, kind of chibi, like really long wiggly styles. But I overall am very inspired by the original 80s aesthetic from Gen 1. I love it. You know, just like that very soft watercolor pastel, just like cutesy warm style that we see in things like Strawberry Shortcake, the Serendipity books, Care Bears. I just love it all. But I'm also inspired by a lot of modern artists, some of which are channeling like that same kind of like 80s, you know, just watercolor aesthetic, but others that are like going way more toony with it. It's just so good. So I'm gonna start with a more like scribbly loose style that I feature more in my slideshows. I'm going with Sunburst, the favorite. So when it comes to pony faces, like I said earlier, I change a lot depending on how stylized I want to go. When it comes to drawing dudes, I have a really hard time not giving them like hot, like sleepy anime boy eyes. I don't know why this keeps happening. It's just the way that the cookie continues to crumble. But with Sunburst, I'll say it, I'm not scared. I think he's a very handsome horse. You know, he's got like that cool floppy hair, and this is absolutely just my own brain filling in the gaps, because like honestly in the show, yawn, whatever, but like when I imagine, like, yeah, he's probably like a real handsome guy. So, you know, I gotta give him the floppy hair. Before I start coloring, now's a good time to mention what brushes I like to use. This is from the Digital Art Junkie. It's a bunch of realistic watercolor brushes for Procreate. It's $10 for the whole pack. I really enjoy them, especially for these. I was actually working on a children's book before I started on this series, so they're getting a lot of good use out of these. But anyways, I'm just color matching, going in, coloring in different ways. You can totally use the paint bucket tool if you want to, or just, you know, like highlight and fill in. I prefer to color it by hand. I just like the texture that it gives again. But anyways, yeah, just going in there, finding the markings, doing what you need to do. Coloring is usually the most boring part for me. I am anti-line work, anti-coloring, but it's something that needs to happen or something, I guess, sometimes, not always. But yeah, no, when it comes to hoof color, I waffle a lot on whether or not I even give them like different colored hooves at all. I usually try to pick a color that is like not really sprinkled throughout the color scheme. So I feel like he has a lot of blues up top, and if you were wearing his cloak, I would be content to give him like bright orange hooves. I'm not doing that. I'm picking his eye color for hooves, just like balance it out a little bit. You know, we have it on the top and the bottom. So for line work, I usually make around the head a more warm color, make the bottom pretty dark just to kind of give it that little bit of depth and to make the top pop a little bit. And then I'm gonna pick a bright contrasting color. I went with a pink just because I felt like that fit, and then I'm going in with the screen layer, picking the accursed Lavender Town Rusty Brown for shading for this one, and just giving it different. Messing with the blending modes, I change it every time, whatever I feel like is gonna work best. But yeah, we're continuing. We're giving him next horse. Me and this horse, we have a history. I freaking love her. I just unearthed her from the garage a couple days ago. Her legal name is Twinkle Bloom. I'm not buying that. She, to me, was always like a more mature older sister type, and I think that has to do with the fact that I thought as a kid she looked like freaking Jennifer Aniston, like Rachel Green from Friends. Like, do you see it? I think it's the hair mostly. I'm not saying that like Jennifer Aniston looks like a horse, but you see it, right? Anyways, I forgot to record the sketch, but I basically just did everything that we saw before. But here I was trying to show different ways to draw the wing. I'm drawing the wing structure, and every wing can basically be broken down into 3 different parts. There's like the main bulk of it, like base feathers, and then flight feathers. I decided to go for style. I could have had it going out. I didn't want to. I thought the silhouette looked cooler with both wings like sticking straight out behind her. So yeah, did my thing, color picked, colored that girly in. You'll see that I changed her face in a minute because I didn't think she looked very like young. You know, like look at that. So much rounder, so much more cuter. Wah. Going for that more Eni style. You see how it is. My rendering process, I don't actually use smudge brushes a lot. I usually prefer to just like color pick the in-between colors and then just kind of like go back and forth until I have the type of gradient I want. I tried to use the smudge brush a bit. I just don't really like it. I didn't like the results I was yielding. But anyways, I'm mostly gonna talk about my history with the horses. So My Little Pony Friendship is Magic came out in 2009, 2010 question mark, I don't really remember. So I was like 6 or 7 when it came out, and I was like instantly hooked. The first time I drew any of the G4 ponies was the first day that it actually aired. I saw the first 2 episodes back to back, and I freaking loved it. I remember it so vividly. I wish I had this somewhere. I drew Rarity's boutique, and I drew her red sewing machine because remember they were showing all that shit around, and she had like secret trap doors all in the boutique, and she was setting traps for like robbers. Really smart Rarity, I don't know. But anyways, with this horse, I was kind of waffling on how I wanted to portray her. I actually feel like the finished illustration, it's really cute, but it's not a representation of like who she was as a person. Like when I would play with toys, it wouldn't be the same storyline every time, but it would definitely be like the same toys would play the same type of characters. That's what I'm saying. Like she was usually like an older sister. She was usually like a teen mom. So if it wasn't always her kids, she was like kind of like, had custody of her younger siblings, kind of like Nani from Lilo and Stitch, or like Fiona Gallagher from Shameless. She was always that kind of girl, and she was always getting it done. She was taking care of everybody. She was like adopting other people's kids. She was a single mom who worked 2 jobs, even if she never actually had kids of her own. She was just that cool. So kind of how I mentioned earlier about like different horse body types, I think so. I also had G3 Rarity, but it was like the big unicorn version. She was usually like some type of maternal figure too. So this was even before like G4 had come out, but remember G3 had the chunkier, more horse-like bodies, and they had like the weird little bobblehead ones. Those ones to me, first off, are like freaking weird looking. They look kind of like like ducks or geese or something, like the way that their like muzzles are. But anyways, the weird ones were always kids, and then like the more horsey looking ones were always adults, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So even after I was getting like all these G4 toys, I was like promoting segregation with my toys. Like the G4 ponies did not fit in with the G3 ones, and it wasn't even like, oh, you can't stay with us. I just would not play with them at the same time because they were so different. I don't know why that was an issue for me, but like this girl, Miss Rachel, I changed her name all the time, and I'm just gonna call her Miss Rachel or like Jennifer, I don't know, Jennifer or Rachel. I think Rachel fits better. I don't know, you guys let me know. She would like adopt like freaking Monster High pets, which there was only one pet. I only have Watsit, but I freaking love Watsit. Okay, she would be like adopting Watsit because there was a whole storyline there about Watsit like being a monster and being like a Franken pup. That was a problem, and all the other Littlest pet shops hated Watsit, but she still adopted Watsit and other Littlest pet shop animals. That's just how the frick she was. She was that cool. Okay, she was that supportive. She was a pillar in her community, dude. This is supposed to be about art. Yeah, no, I definitely learned better from watching people do it than having people explain it, but I will explain a bit of the theory of the way that I do things. So earlier I was explaining a lot about anatomy and like finding the bones, and I was talking about how a lot of the time when you look at a more toony, like cartoonist's style, people usually think that it's just like stripping away anatomy and then like breaking it down to its basics, which that's kind of what's happening, but I kind of like to think of it as the reverse, where you start with something like very toony and kind of structureless, and then you just add those elements back into it to make it a bit more believable, make a bit more sense, and make it easier for you as an artist to be able to break it down. So with situations like this, it's like I said, with the connecting points being the most important thing, it's also just going to help you like wrap your head around why things are breaking the way that they're breaking. So you definitely need to know the rules before you can break them. But I used to think, and I see a lot of other people kind of repeating the same type of mantra, you don't need to master or even fully understand the rules before you break them. You kind of just need to be aware of them. Yes, it's a good thing to, just like have a functioning knowledge of why things are the way they are, but you don't need to be a master. So I definitely, for a long time, would not let myself just do what I wanted to do, and I would do the same type of studies, learning the same type of things, trying to get to a master level before I would let myself break the rules. And I didn't really see myself progress much until I kind of went back to basics and I was just drawing what I wanted to draw, not really caring. And then you reference real world references. It doesn't always have to be anatomy. It can be things like how a chair is, how fabric falls, how hair comes out of a scalp, just stuff like that is what you want to look at as a reference, as a basis to sort of like ground the aspects that you might not have a solid understanding of or that you just are not pleased with. It doesn't always have to work that way, but yeah, no, I think that the art community, especially on TikTok, is kind of like the worst place in the world sometimes. I'm not really gonna elaborate on that. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, carrying on with the rendering process, so I just like merged everything down into one layer, and I flippin' hate doing line work. I don't know what it is. It just never comes out the way I want it to. It's a grueling and painful and horrible, torturous process, and I don't want to do it. So I prefer to just like render over a sketch to give the impression of line work, and then I also feel like that gives me a lot more control over line weight, the colors of things in very specific parts, instead of having to just go over it all at the end and lose sight of it. I can control it bit by bit, which I definitely prefer. Just trying to get some fluffy textures in there, not too much. I usually try to make my horses like pretty fluffy. I give them like crazy chest fluff and stuff. Not so much with her. She's pretty smooth and sleek, and she's glittery, so only a little bit. I had to get it in there, but not that much. You know how it is. So for anyone that's been keeping up with my infection series, I'm sure you'll have noticed that the popularity of it has died down quite a bit. I'm not gonna give up on it. I have a story that I want to finish. I know how it's going to go. But it has me thinking about just, being a content creator. That's the douchiest thing. I hate when people call themselves content creators, but it's a feasible thing for me now, it seems, not just like through ponies, but just like, with art and animation and storytelling in general. So I'm definitely wanting to keep going with TikTok and maybe expand onto YouTube if possible. I'm not really sure what kind of content I would make. I have, more stories that I would love to tell in the future. I just don't know if that's going to keep anybody around, if that makes sense. I feel like I've kind of found my niche with, mascot horror, I guess. I don't really want to stay there forever. Like I said before, I was working on a children's book before I started with this. I'm working like 2 different positions right now, well, multiple different positions, but for like 2 different companies right now, and it's just, I'm all over the place. I don't know where I'm going, and it's been a heck of an adventure. I don't know, wherever this ends up taking me, I hope I can enjoy myself, but I would not have been able to dedicate this much time to any of it if it wasn't for all the support that I've gotten on Patreon so far. And it's dropped a lot in, the past couple of weeks. That's to be expected. The whole trend's dying down. A lot of people only joined because they wanted a very specific thing, and the hype has kind of died down. But for anyone to have even considered it at all, it's just so crazy. You watch all these other people do it and you never really think that it will be you. Ugh. So here we are with the finished piece. Oh my god, she's so cute. I was going for a kind of like classic postcard style, kind of like, OG strawberry shortcake or Care Bears. So adorable. I flippin' love her. So yes, this is the first of definitely multiple. I'm not sure if I'm gonna make separate tutorials for the drawing and animating of wiggly horses. We will see about that, but I hope to see you in the next video. I never thought I'd say that. Bye. But before we say goodbye, we must say a beautiful thank you to all of my beautiful, lovely, darling, cherubic patrons. Look at all of them. Goodness gracious. So most of these dudes are here for free. The lowest tier, other than free, obviously starts at $3. So if you want to see more, if you want to support me, check me out.